All right, now we are on to chapter 3. We're going to talk a little bit about some more law enforcement history. We're going to go over the written portion of the tests that law enforcement officers have to take before getting hired. And finally, we're going to go over the police reports, which there are two assignments that deal with the police report. So make sure you pay close attention to those areas. All right, so a little more history of law enforcement. We're going to go into, we went into the eras of women in policing, and now we're going to go over just the main eras of policing. So, first of all, there was the political era. That was in the 1830s to 1900s. You had a lot of political corruption and manipulation that was done, where you would have, for example, politicians that had police officers that they would bribe, or mafia, or crime organizations. And basically, the only qualification for becoming a good police officer was your political connection, not if you had a good ability to help people and wanted to help people. Corruption was out there, and actually, at this time, Chicago was called the most corrupt city in the country. All right, moving on, we called the Reform Era. That was 1900 to 1960s. And this was where they were trying to centralize police administration. They knew they had a problem with corruption, and they were trying to improve the quality of police personnel. And the ideas of police professionalism really hit the era. Also, the Wickersham Commission report in 1931. That was a commission that was put together to look into police corruption because they knew they had a problem with the political era. Also, we've talked about August Vollmer before, but the Reform era was when August Vollmer really came onto the scene and became the father of American police professionalism. All right, policing in the 1960s and 70s was really one of the most challenging eras in American policing. The crime rate had doubled. The civil rights movement had began, anti-war sentiments occurred along with different riots. And so CALEA was established. And you want to know what CALEA is. It's at the very bottom of this slide. And it's basically, it's accreditation for law enforcement agencies. So just like you go to SOU, which is an accredited university, there is an accreditation process for police departments. Now it's voluntary. Police departments don't have to be accredited. And a lot of times the one thing standing in between police departments being accredited is money, because it can be upwards of $100,000 a year to be accredited, because you have to pay for people to come in annually to check and make sure you're following certain policies and procedures and certain ways that you operate and conduct business. So, but you can look to see if an agency is accredited, and that says a lot about the agency. All right, then we have the community policing or problem solving era. So in the 80s, we really started saying, you know what? Crime is just not something that we should call the police for, and they should have an answer for, because before this, officers really responded to your more violent crimes. And in this new era, we had more of your disputes and things that were occurring. So it really became an era of, you know what? It takes a whole community. It takes a community. It takes community leaders. It takes police. It takes everybody to try to make crime in an area lower. All right, problem-oriented policing. So you have community-oriented policing, which is COP, or POP, which basically says that officers are going to look at the problem and try to solve that problem in order to lower the crime rate or whatever the problem is in the era. Okay, now we're going to go into a little bit about unions and collective bargaining. So what is collective bargaining? What are police unions? You do need to know what collective bargaining is and what police unions are. So we're going to talk about them a little bit. All right, so police unions and collective bargaining. So police departments generally have police unions, and those unions are made up of a president of the union, a vice president, basically a board. And that board meets, and when it comes time to renew the contract for that police department, so for example, contracts can be 3 years, 5 years, that's more the norm. Your police union is the one that goes and meets with either the city or the county or the state administration and does what's called collective bargaining. And collective bargaining is where your union will fight for wage increases, for the officers, time off, sick leave, also things like grievances. So if an officer got in trouble and they feel that they were unrightfully disciplined, it's the process that goes through for the officer to be disciplined and also for the officer to fight that through a grievance. So collective bargaining is basically just your police union fighting for wages, time off, and how business is handled day to day for a police officer. All right. I often hear, can police departments strike? Well, a long time ago, they used to be able to. Nowadays, they can't. That is in their contracts through collective bargaining. And what it basically says is we need police services. If police officers and the police union were going to collective bargaining and they weren't going to give the police officers, the city, for example, wasn't going to give the police officers for a city a raise, and the officers held a strike, we'd have no officers to answer emergency services. So basically, what happens during collective bargaining is if the police union and the administration or the city does not agree with something, generally, instead of striking, it goes to an arbitrator, and the arbitrator kind of makes the decision on who they're going to decide for or where in the middle they're going to find a happy ground. All right, accreditation, I kind of talked about that earlier, but that's CALEA, Commission on Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. It was established in 1979. All right, now we are going to move on to our next part, which is the written test. So let's review the law enforcement testing process. You have the job application where you fill out all the information about yourself, a normal job application. You then take a written test, which we're going to review here, what's on that written test. You then do the physical agility or physical fitness test. If you pass that, you go on to an oral board interview. Then there's a very thorough background investigation with the background investigator. Then there's a CVSA or polygraph lie detector test. CVSA is a computer voice stress analysis, which we'll go over later. A psychological evaluation, and then a medical physical with a general physician, and finally with some departments a final chief or sheriff's interview. So let's continue talking about the written test. So what is the written test? Number one, it's the most failed portions of the law enforcement hiring process. Why? Lack of preparation. I used to have a lot of students that would get their bachelor's degree in criminal justice, not study for a written test, and come back and say, I failed it. Well, you have to study for it. You have to prepare for it. It's like an ACT or SAT, and you need to get used to being timed and being under that pressure of being timed when you take a test, and you need to kind of cover the main areas. And there's lots of information in this textbook. There's some practice tests so you can see what kind of questions are on there, but you definitely need to prepare. All right, so why is there a written exam? Well, it helps to ensure that the candidate can read, understand, and make sound decisions, since that is what we require of officers, since they are constantly being trained and certified and tested. So again, yes, you have to study for the written exam. The best way to study is a little bit over a longer period of time. I normally recommend students start at least a year ahead. Worst case scenario, 6 months ahead. I have seen students do it in 3 months, but anything more than that, it's really difficult. So are there different written exams? Of course, not every law enforcement agency is the same. Every law enforcement agency is its own entity. So therefore, it is up to that law enforcement agency and their human resources department to determine which written exam is utilized. So here's some examples of different companies that write written exams, and a lot of agencies will purchase those written exams from those companies. So you can pause and look through the different exams. As you can see in Oregon, there's 3 different ones utilized. All right, so where do you take the written exam? Well, historically, like when I took it, you went to a big old building and they gave it to you all at once and you had to wait for your score. With technology, a lot of departments now are going to online testing. It's where you go to a proctored location, you give your proper ID, you take the test, and then depending if that agency accepts that online testing company, you can send your test results, and that's one less thing you have to do. So if you're out of town, if you live in Oregon and you're testing, let's say in Texas, you don't have to fly to Texas just to take the written exam. That's easy to fill out the job application and do the written exam online without having to leave your location and spend a bunch of money to travel. Okay, the 7 categories of questions on the written exam. I've put them into 7 categories. You'll see different study guides will maybe separate them out even more, but these are mainly the things that they're looking for. So number 1 is judgment and reasoning, which is deductive and inductive reasoning. Memorization and observation, such as looking at a wanted poster. Number 3 is mathematics. Number 4 is knowing how to fill out a form, understanding policies, procedures, being able to read legal definitions. Number 5, which we're going to cover in this a little bit more, and you're going to go over some report writing assignments, is police report writing, which includes grammar, punctuation, sentence structure, spelling, and vocabulary. Number 6, reading comprehension, which means your data interpretation. And finally, traffic maps. You need to be able to have directional orientation. All right, so again, I'm not going to review the 7 categories. I don't expect you to know all the 7 categories like I cover in the textbook. However, if you are interested in going into law enforcement, I highly recommend you cover them now and definitely start a year ahead before you want to test to start studying. And there's some study guides in Chapter 3 as well to help you know what to study and when on a timeline. All right, now we're going into police report writing, and this is huge because this covers 2 of your assignments. So make sure you review this or you bring this back up to understand how to complete the assignments. So in police report writing, generally the opening sentence of every police report should include the date, the time, the location, and the nature of the call or incident. So within the first sentence or 2, the person reading the report, whether it's the district attorney, whether it's a police supervisor, whether it's a juror, they will know very quickly when, where, and why that officer was responding there. So an example is on Monday, October 7th, 2019, at approximately 1300 hours, I was dispatched to Southern Oregon University, located at 1250 Siskiyou Boulevard, in reference to a white male adult who was walking in front of the bookstore and yelling at students. So you can follow this as a template, and you just, when you do your police report, you just change the date, the time, and the nature of the call. All right, so we're going to go over 9 police report writing rules. And when I grade your assignments, I'm going to be looking for these. And this is what you will get dinged on if you don't follow these 9 rules. So make sure you follow these rules. Okay, number 1, you write in first person. So you write from the officer's or your perspective. So I did this, I did that, I spoke to this person, I spoke to that person. First person. Number 2, active voice, not passive. So you should say, I read the suspect his rights per Miranda. You don't want to say, the suspect was read Miranda. That's too open to interpretation. Who read the suspect Miranda? A defense attorney might want to know. All right, number 3 of 9. Do not make assumptions. So you don't want to go, I met with Mary Smith and she was very upset. Well, that you're making an assumption. You don't ever make an assumption. You can say what Mary Smith said. You can say if she yelled. You can say if she hit something, but you can't make an assumption that she's mad. Another example would be, I walked into the house. It was very dirty. Well, dirty to you, maybe dirty, not dirty to someone else. So you're making an assumption. You cannot, in a police report, make assumptions. You can say, when I walked into the living room, the coffee table was turned over. There was food all over the floor. The carpets had stains all over them. You can say things like that that are fact, but you cannot make assumptions. All right, number 4 of 9, you do not, and I know everybody wants to do this, do not use police jargon. Don't say, I advised the person. Say, I told the person. Don't say, I observed. Say, I saw. Don't say I approximated or code 4. You need to write very to the point. So many people are taught to write creatively. Then when it comes to police report writing, they try to add that creativeness, and this is not the time for it. This is fact only, no opinions, no assumptions, no police jargon. All right, number 5 of 9, details, details, details. I will tell you this many times, and I guarantee when I read your police reports, many of you, I'll tell you this. Someone should be able to read your police report, and if there were two people that physically fought, they should be able to take two people and recreate what happened just from your police report. So, for example, don't say, I took the person to the ground. Well, imagine trying to recreate that. Many different people would recreate that differently. However, if you said, I grabbed the person's right wrist with my right hand and fingers, I held on tightly, and I pushed the top of their shoulders with the top of their right shoulder with my left hand, which caused them to fall to both of their knees. Do you see the difference? With that, you can recreate it. If you don't do that where I can recreate it, you're not detailed enough. Again, number 6, no opinions, only facts. Number 7, we write in past tense and chronological order. You always write in past tense. I did this, I did that. And then you always write in chronological order from the officer's viewpoint. When I arrived, I spoke to the suspect. Then I did this. Then I did that. Then I did that. Then I saw this. Then this person told me that. 8 of 9. Do not use unnecessary words. This is not a creative fiction book. This is a police report that includes only the facts, no assumptions. And 9, just like you should be detailed, you should not be vague. All right, here are the most common police report writing errors. There's 10 of them. One is not giving clear directions, spelling issues. That's why I have you write this in Microsoft Word only, because if something's underlined in green or red, you have some type of issue with spelling or grammar. 3 is inappropriate or no apostrophes. 4 is inappropriate or no commas. 5 is double negatives. 6 is homophones. 7 is parallelism. 8 is pronouns. 9 is subject-verb agreement. And 10 is verb tense. If you want to know more about what a homophone or a parallelism is, make sure you look in your textbook where I go in and explain each one of these. All right, so like I said, the perfect study plan takes 1 year. If you want to appropriately study for the 7 categories that are on the written exam. All right, that ends this chapter. We'll see you for the next topic.